see on Google Classroom, I just posted a few minutes ago an overview handout for the short answer question. So I'm going to share my screen and show that to you. Of course, this should look familiar if you took APUSH last year, which I believe all of you did. So let me go to the right place. And the right place is, where is the right place? That's not it. Nope, that's my contract for academic team. That's some Ballard crap. I think I actually opened Zoom in the window. I did have Google Classroom open. Yay, I'm old officially. That's exciting. So give me just a second, my humble apologies. And there we go. Oh no, I already had it open. I just was too dumb to miss it. Well, that's fine. So, short answer question. We have 4 parts to the AP test, which I know all of you know. It is exactly the same as it was last year. It was, you guys had this structure when you were AP Worlding, right? This was the first, you all had short answers and LEQs and all that stuff. Is that, I think so. I think you are our first 3-year people doing the same thing, which means you should crush it. I think I told you that last year I had the most 5s I've ever had in AP Euro, and frankly, and much love to the class of 2020 for all they endured, but they had the worst scores as sophomores when I had them 2 years earlier. So to say that I was more than surprised, I thought we'd do better, but I mean, 1/4 of the kids that took AP Euro last year got a 5, which is pretty remarkable. So, and you guys, frankly, to be very honest, are a much stronger group academically, at least from what I know of you as sophomores, than the group from last year. So usually the reason my seniors don't get 5s is they kind of get weary at the end of their school year, or you know that you've already gotten AP World credit and the school's not going to give you AP Euro credit as well, because some of your institutions that will be the case. Some will allow it, some won't. And frankly, you just get tired, it's graduation, and you get a little lazy. So I've never worried about 5s a whole lot with seniors, because I always say I can teach anybody to a 3 and I can teach most people to a 4. I really can't teach 58 students to a 5. Now, if I just had 20 of you and you all wanted to get 5s, I could teach you to a 5. But I can't do that when I've got people that are just happy to be here, that are like, wee, that either like me or just like history and don't put in a ton of effort. And not that any of you are those people, but you will be, because I've done this a long time and that's just how it works. So the short answer is the easiest part. Super, super easy. Short answer, multiple choice, long essay, DBQ. Okay, and we'll do all 4 of those things, of course. We'll look at LEQs here in a couple weeks. But for now, short answer is the first thing we're going to practice. We will do a practice on the Reformation. So next week after we cover the Reformation, I'll give you a couple short answers on the Reformation to take home and practice. So the short answer is the exact same. We might use slightly different terminology, but it's the same concept. So I do not hold seniors to a defined structure. If you are successful in this endeavor and know how to do it, I'm not going to say like you got to do this. Now I'm going to introduce an acronym to you that you may have heard, you may not have, but it's pretty straightforward. So if you want to use it, great. If you want to do your own thing, as long as the results are good, I don't care. So we know it's short answer. At the end, there's going to be 3 questions. Each part will have 3 parts to it. So if you're doing a complete, fully formed short answer, it's going to be 9 paragraphs. 9 paragraphs. You have 40 minutes to do this when we get good at it, which will not be right away. So you're looking at about 4.5 minutes per paragraph, and that includes reading and processing. So I would like to remind you of an old friend for those of you that know me before, and those of you who are new to me, this is a concept that I do not test me on, because this is non-negotiable. No pre-writing, no grade. Short answers, typically the question is the top half of the paper, the bottom half is blank. I expect to see pre-writing of some sort. Now, pre-writing could be bullet points. It could be Venn diagram. It could be a T-chart. It could be complete sentences. I don't care what it is. It needs to be some level of, I see you processing your information. Well, Ms. Trich, I don't need to do that. That's a lie. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you need to do some level of planning that I can see evidence of your thought process. This is also important when we later on break down the AP test and look at how we're going to organize our time. All right, so pre-writing required. If you don't have pre-writing when you turn one of these in, I will not grade it, you get a 0. I refuse to grade short answers or any essay without pre-writing, period, the end. But Mr. Rich, that's not fair. Ordinarily, I love to debate, I love to negotiate. This is non-negotiable, this is not to be discussed. There is nothing you can say that will change my mind, period, the end. And that is a rare thing for me. As a former debater myself, I enjoy a good intellectual repartee, and I want your opinions and thoughts. In this case, I do not. All right. You will get a box You are familiar with this, I imagine. Each page gets one box. You cannot write outside of the box. Any writing outside of the box will not be scored. If you finish part 1 early and you want to put part 2 in box 1, that will not be scored. You can only put the answer in the labeled box as it is on the paper, which is why if you decide to go out of order on this, you've got to be careful to put the answer to number 2 and number 2, the answer to number 3 and number 3, etc. Well, Mr. Rich, I think they'll grade it anyway. I don't know, and I don't want you to have to find out. I doubt it, because people grade separate questions. What they do at the AP testing is they make copies or scan everything in, and then the people that are grading short answer number 1 only get your short answer number 1. So if you wrote the answer to number 2 and number 1, that's not an easy fix, especially when the reading was online last year. Who knows what the reading is going to be like this year? It's not an easy fix. So they're just going to give you a 0 and move on. So of all the reasons not to pass the AP test or get the score you want, that may be the dumbest, as you put the right answer in the wrong box. I mean, it just might be. All right, so there's part A, part B, or part C. Sometimes you will see answers that require 2 answers. So you might say A, you need 2 answers, and then there's a B, and then there's obviously no C. That does happen on occasion. Now, we're not getting into all the detail right now of this, but you see that bullet point there in the middle of the page? There are 3 questions. The first question, you're analyzing a secondary source, usually a textual work, but it could be a visual, but usually it's text. And so we're talking usually a paragraph, sometimes 2 paragraphs for comparison and contrast. The second source is primary source and or visual. So we have photographs, we have maps, we have charts, all that good stuff. And usually 1 or 2 of the 3-part question is about the source itself. So even if you don't remember the topic that it's asking about, you're literally answering a question about a paragraph. You've been doing that since you were in school. So you should never leave questions blank. You should never say, I don't really know this. That you're at least 1 or 2 of the parts is directly answering what you just read or looked at. So that should always be something you can pull something out of there and use. All right. I believe the short answer is the easiest question because the format's easy, and also because the topics are always big picture things. This is not the minutia. This is not the random thing from the textbook Mr. Rich didn't cover and we looked at in a study guide for 2 minutes the day before the test. This is going to be a question about the Italian Renaissance. And you're going to know 1 or 2 painters and ideas of the Renaissance. After last week, if you don't know that, shame on you. Okay? This is going to be what caused the Reformation, which we're going to talk about 4 or 5 reasons. You're going to need 1. At the most, ever 2. Okay? Speaking of that, you should have turned in your reading quiz. For some reason you didn't, make sure I get that in today, please. All right? So if you're like, oh crap, reading quiz, answered, turned it into me on Classroom. All right, and then question 3, you're going to get 2 options. You will pick one of those 2 options. They never have stimuli there. It's always just 1 or 2 sentences of really basic stuff. The Renaissance is said to be a rebirth of culture in Europe. Defend or disagree with this statement? I mean, come on. Pretty easy. And it doesn't matter if you defend or agree or disagree. It's your choice. This is history. As long as you can justify it, it's all good. All right. And then I think that last bullet point is very important. Answer what it's asking, not what you think it was asking. Sometimes we get in a hurry. Some of you have heard this statement many times before. Be quick, but don't hurry. 4.5 minutes per question, including reading, processing, and answering is scooting. Some of you will never finish all 9 parts. You just never will. You're not fast enough. And that's okay. Doesn't mean you're a bad student or that you're not going to pass or you're not going to get a good score. It's just you won't finish. Or you won't finish well. Don't be in a hurry and then you skip the part of the question you're supposed to be focusing on. I'd rather you take 30 seconds and read it carefully than spend 10 and miss the thing, and then in the next 7 minutes are a waste because you answered the wrong question. So be quick, but don't hurry. You'll hear me say that over and over and over again because it's important. All right, and I believe in that philosophy. It's always helped me because sometimes when I get impatient and I get in a rush is when I make silly mistakes. Not mistakes you don't understand, because there's some things you just may not know, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's nothing worse than getting a test back and seeing the answer and going, oh my gosh, why did I do that? And you realize it was dumb and you knew the material. It's because you're in a hurry, you're in a rush. You got stressed out, your hand hurt, you had to pee, the bell was almost going to ring, whatever is going on, you know that that's something you should not have done. So we want to avoid that if at all possible. All right. And then lastly, claim, evidence, explain. So you're writing a paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences per each part. You're going to answer the question with a claim. I ask that the easiest way to do this is just to restate the question. Now, again, if you can do this and not restate the question, I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. I make my sophomores do this. Okay. So if it's about, agree with the source says the Renaissance is the greatest thing that's ever happened. It completely rechanged human society. We are born anew as a species after the Renaissance. And you're like, the Renaissance was cool, but it wasn't that revolutionary. Like, we still have poor people. We still have discrimination. We still kill each other in violent acts. People still commit crime. So I don't think it completely revolutionized the entire human species. Slow your roll. All right. So some version of that would be your claim. You're going to say why, evidence. So this is the reasons you believe that to be the case. We still murder each other. We still have war. Heck, we have wars during the Renaissance. So it's not like there was even a temporary time where all fighting ceased and we all loved each other in a big circle and held hands and sang Kumbaya. That didn't happen. And then, of course, the explain. The most important part, as always, is your explanation. So let me be very clear. Even if the question says identify, and you're like, well, I just need to put 4 words in a period. I always want you to do claim, evidence, explanation in every paragraph for every short answer question. Let me say that one more time. And if you need to write this down, feel free. I always want you to do this no matter what the prompt says. I want claim, evidence, explanation every single time. Because it's another 1 or 2 sentences. It's not difficult. You can all do it. And I'd rather be safe. Plus, if you always do it, there won't be a situation where it says explain and you identify and don't explain, because you'll be in that habit. Okay, and those of you that have this experience before, you know my concern. I am not concerned of any of you in the spring not knowing enough content. Even if we don't get to cover as much as we normally would, you're going to know enough. I believe that. I do. I'm never worried about covering content with my kids. Those of you that I know well, I am not worried about you soaking in the content you need to know. That is not my concern. My concern is on test day, you doing something silly and making dumb choices. Out of stress, out of exhaustion, out of, I'm a senior graduating in 2 weeks, whatever the situation may be, that's my only concern. So we want to do everything we can to build up good habits where that doesn't happen. Okay, so that's it. It's pretty straightforward. I will give you, again, a sample one next week to write. If you have any questions, if this is something that seems hard to you, we can discuss it. It's just a participation grade. So if you need to email me and say, Mr. Rich, can we talk about this? I'm really confused. That's fine. You can also just bomb it, and then I'll give you a good grade anyway, and then we can talk about it once I've graded it. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. Switching. We are going to review the Renaissance very briefly. We did almost everything we need to do, but I just want to make sure that we are in good shape with a couple of concepts. So you all did a very good job overall on your presentations. I was pleased. I think every single one of you should be able to take 1 or 2 artistic terms, things like linear perspective or chiaroscuro or foreshortening or aerial perspective or whatever it is, vanishing point and fresco, etc. And you should be able to describe it 1 or 2 of those terms. You should also be able to compare and contrast 1 or 2 major ideas of the Italian and Northern Renaissances. Okay? So before I move on with 2 or 3 other quick things, you've had 4 days off. I'm sure all of you thought about the Renaissance exhaustively over this long weekend. If you hear me say what I just said and you are having a brain fart and would like to ask any questions, this would be a great time. No judgment, no anger, no frustration. I'm asking if you need any quick remediation, this would be a good time. Okay, so Renaissance experts we are, fair enough. Now, I want to do a couple things. Briefly, let's talk about the political aspect of the Renaissance very, very briefly. Couple things that were in your text that I'm sure you've never heard of before last week. Florence, the unofficial capital of the Renaissance. Italy is not unified until the 19th century. I would argue that division is one of the things that actually helped spur the Renaissance, because the city-states are competing against each other for artists, for art, for new churches, etc., for trade, and all that competition encourages them to get more and more and make more and more. In Florence in 1378, we have what's called the Ciompi Revolt. Now, Florence was a republic. We hear that term, we have certain expectations. Can someone tell me, in terms of definition, what a republic is? You're living in one, by the way.
That's where your leaders are elected and they represent you, right?
Broadly, yes. It's not about the leader part, it's from the participant part. It means that people get to vote. Now, what kind of people, how many? Democracy is the old Greek word, literally meaning of the people, government of the people. Demos means people in Greek. So a democracy is, in theory, when a majority of your citizens are participating in the act. Now, as we know from reviewing our documents last week, the concept of civic humanism, we want more people to participate. Do we want everybody to participate? No, the unwashed masses should not be participating in our government. We're talking about the educated, the wealthy, yada, yada, yada. Okay? So the Ciompi Revolt is a time, this is before the Medici have completely taken hold over the city. And the Ciompi Revolt is when the lower classes rise up and overthrow the Republican leaders. And we have about 6 years of a government of almost like a proto-democracy. All right, proto meaning early, kind of not well developed. They didn't have elections in that way, but it was run by the average citizens of Florence. Here's the problem. It went really bad. Governing stuff is hard. I talk about this all the time. The number one thing people like to do is complain about their boss. It's what you do at work. Y'all complain about your family or your parents or your teachers. Completely understandable. Sometimes we deserve it. And some of my colleagues, Dr. Noose is great. We like him. Plus, he's a lot better than the previous regime, which you guys didn't see, but trust me. All right? So, but he's not perfect and he messes up, and it's human nature. But a lot of times when people complain, I just look at them and say, what administrative experience do you have? Have you ever run anything of any consequence? Not trying to be mean, and again, it doesn't mean that I'm perfect because I'm not, but I have run a summer program with about 1/5 of Ballard's population. So it's not quite the same thing, but it's residential. So I would argue that gives me twice the frustration. At the end of the school day, y'all go home, and that's not our issue. What I do in the summer, I'm in charge of everybody from when they step on to when they leave off for 5 weeks, plus before that, and planning, et cetera. So not that it's the same thing. High school principal is much harder than running GSP, trust me. But I always say, what experience do you have as an administrator? And the answer is almost entirely none. Because if you've ever done that job, you know how hard it is. And you know how much crap you get to eat on a daily basis. It's kind of like when people complain about coaches. Have you ever coached before? Usually the people that are the biggest critics of games and yelling at the refs and that kind of thing have never coached before. Because I always tell people, I work at one of the best schools in the state of Kentucky by any rankings you measure. I teach all advanced placement classes, and my kids are awesome. And I still repeat myself 25 times a day. And I still get emails before every assignment is due asking about something I said in class 14 times. Does that make me mad or frustrated? No. It's the job. People don't pay attention. People forget. It's not the way it's clear to me in my head is often not the way it's clear to you, because you have 6 other classes. Now, granted, so do I, but I'm repeating myself. I have 3 different sections of class I teach. So for me, it's repetitive, not the way. And also, I've designed it. It's my baby, so it's in my head, so I know it. And I don't say that to be critical. I'll just say most people that criticize coaches have never coached a thing in their life. Most people that criticize the way things have run have never run anything in their lives. This is an example of what happens in Florence. The leaders suck. They're terrible. We hate them. And then we overthrow them and take power. Because for most times in human history, the peasants are 95% of the population. They could easily take power if they wanted to. And what they realize is this is hard and we're not good at it. So after 6 years, they asked the family that was in power to come back and take over again. And we're very sorry and we'll never do it again. Which is kind of interesting. And so what the Ciompi Revolt does is, for many generations, really the generation that will engage in the Renaissance, they're not trying to take power. They're not looking to overthrow anybody. They realize the system that they have works pretty well for them. And so the Medici are going to get widespread support for much of their rule. Not always, but for much of their rule, the Medici are widely supported. And a person from the Medici family rules Florence for about 95% of the time for the next 250 years. Okay, so it's a republic. We have votes, but the same family wins every time. Really Republican in that way? No, not really. Not really. Republican little r, obviously not the American political party. So that's the Chompy Revolt. The other one that's significant, and this is even more so because it's in our time period, is the Treaty of Lodi, 1454. Early in our time period, so a good explainer of what happens later. The Treaty of Lodi is a mutual defense pact, a peace treaty between several of the major city-states of the Italian peninsula. The Venetians, the Florentines, the Milanese, Milan, and Naples. Rome is not involved because, the Pope doesn't play nice with others, but the other big states in the Italian peninsula agree to not fight each other and to support against any potential foreign invasion. Namely, what we're worried about at this point is the French. We'll get to the French soon. Ooh la la, okay? So, for 40 years, this treaty holds, 40 years. And during this time, we don't have any conflicts between these states, versus in the previous decades, we'd had almost constant warfare. So I would argue what helps make the Renaissance really ramp up and improve is that the governments, the political leaders of these states, these city-states, are not spending money on war for the vast majority of this time. They're spending money on statues, on churches, on cultural support, which, as we know, one of the major causes of the Renaissance is more rich people who have time and money to give. Very, very important. Okay, Treaty of Lodi, 1454, lasts until 1494, helps explain, and this is when Botticelli's doing his thing. This is young Michelangelo, young Da Vinci, even though some of their accomplishments will come after 1494. By then, we've got the system up and rolling, and we're seeing a lot of the progress that will allow us to support the arts, which is probably our main thing we think of when we think of the Renaissance. Any questions on that? All right, and finally, effects of the Renaissance. Obviously, there's massive cultural effects. But remember, at the time, the Renaissance is mostly an elite movement. It is not something outside of seeing a new church in your town. You're not going to have a whole lot of effects. We're not getting invited. If I'm, Paolo the farmer, Paolo is not getting invited to the Medici Palace to see the new mural that was painted on the wall. They're just not. They can't afford the art. It's not something they are educated to understand the Greco-Roman context. It's just not something that they get because they have received no education, frankly. So the Renaissance is vastly important. I would argue that it begins the tradition in Europe of challenging the status quo, of fighting against tradition, of asking questions, which I think we're going to see definitely in the Reformation next week. But it doesn't have an impact at that time on the average person very much. So I want to make sure we're very clear on that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Everybody good? All right, pretty simple stuff. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen and switch to another device. We're just rolling and rolling. Now let's do a little exploration. This is super easy. You know all of this stuff. You learned some of this stuff in elementary school. Do I need to memorize a bunch of explorers and their locations? No, you do not. Well, how do I know that, Mr. Rich? I've given you a study guide, and you have access to that document. And in that document, it tells you what you need to know. And if you would look at that document, it would help you understand as you read and take notes what to avoid and skip and what to focus on. Or you can just take notes on kind of sort of everything and at the end figure it out. Or you can do what most of you do, which is just kind of sort of guess, take notes on half the reading and hope I don't notice that you didn't take notes in the second half, even though I've read the textbook front to back 4 times and I know it better than you know it. But whatever. All right, so I would encourage you to use the study guide before you look at something. Take 5 minutes and just look at it and see, what does it say I need to know about exploration? And the answer is not much. So that's good. So I'm going to open up another little PowerPoint. We're going to run through it real quick, take about 15, 20 minutes, boom, boom, boom. And then we'll look at Christian humanism. We'll call it a day. All right. So I share my screen again. Different device. Here we go. The age of exploration. Super easy. We're going to run through a lot of this stuff because you know it. Now, there is a huge part of your reading over the weekend about like the Spanish colonial empire. Mr. Rich, do I need to know about that? Well, what's the adjective in the front of that statement? Spanish colonial. Yes. Once the Latin American states are no longer European colonies, we no longer care in this class. The good news is you should kind of sort of know a lot of that stuff because we did an AP World. Cortez, Pizarro, and Encomienda, those are things that should at least have a vague recollection to you. If not, that's okay, we'll do it now. All right, so we know there are previous explorations, but they're minimal. We do not get into the Atlantic Ocean. As I'm sure you know, the ancient Greeks had calculated that the Earth was a sphere. In fact, there was a Greek mathematician who got within like 500 miles of the actual circumference of the Earth, which is pretty darn good considering the tools he had at his exposure. We know that the polos had gone to China. We know that my boy Zheng He, shout out to Zheng He, y'all know he's my dude, everyone's favorite 6'8" Chinese eunuch Muslim admiral. He had done some exploration throughout the Indian Ocean, but the Atlantic Ocean had kind of sort of remained off limits. We thought there was nothing there, and if we crossed that body of water, we would eventually get to, hopefully, today what is places like China and India. All right, so this is a map of the world at the time. It's a little on the rough side. You see vaguely what looks like Africa. You see Europe in the top left corner. You do see like the Middle East looks pretty good. India, for some reason, is shown floating in the Indian Ocean. Some of the big lakes of Eurasia are there. Like you see the Black Sea, you see the Caspian Sea kind of sort of. The Mediterranean looks halfway decent. And this is actually a map from the Muslim world, at least part of it. The white faces at the bottom and the top, not so much. But at least the map comes from the Muslim world originally, and it was copied by a European on this source. So we don't know that the Americas exist. You all know this. It's something you've done for a long time. All right, so why are we doing this? We would like to get more trade out of Asia, but we don't want to go through the Middle East because the Crusades kind of kicked our butt. The Muslims are mean to us, wah, so we'd like to avoid that. Okay, the Renaissance increases our intellectualism and our desire for knowledge of other places, people, etc. We also know that Europeans have started to create universities in the 12, 13, 1400s. And so we're starting to ask more questions. Now, again, the vast majority of people will never attend school of any kind. But again, it's the elite at the top. One of the other reasons why the Renaissance is an elite movement. We also want to spread our faith as the Reformation comes into the 1500s. It will encourage further exploration and conversion of people. Monarchs need money. We can always use money. We got new tech. So gold, God, glory, just like you learned in elementary school. And then if you may remember, I call them the four. That's the why we want to do it. The how we can do it, I call it the 4 C's, which are new technological devices, concepts that create the ability to do it. We'll look at those in just a second. Gold, God, glory. You've learned that for many years before. Okay, so what's some of our new tech? The compass, or also the astrolabe. We know the compass comes from China, and we improve upon it. If we're going to be on large bodies of water with no landmarks, and it's dark outside, we can't see the stars, cloudy or whatever, we're going to need a way to know which way we're going. And that's the compass, and the astrolabe help with that. Better maps, cartography. We have cartographical improvements, better maps. We also have, again, the desire as motivation of finances. So we have cannons, improved gunpowder technology that allow us to defend ourselves against potential thieves, pirates, etc. That's part of it. And then we also have the new ship called the Caravel. The Caravel is Portuguese. We will eventually see other ships, but the Caravel is designed to explore. Later we'll see ships like the Galleon, which is a huge ship designed to come back laden with treasure. But in the early days, the Caravel is the best. Why? We have the introduction of a rudder, a steering wheel. You know, if you look at like ancient Greek or Egyptian or Chinese ships, you just rode in one direction. This has a steering wheel. These latine or triangular sails allows you to rotate your sail and not be fighting the wind. You can take the sail down, you can rotate the sail. That allows you more navigation. And then these ships, most importantly, these ships can go on ocean. They can also go in rivers. So when we get to a new place and we want to explore, we can safely stay on the boat and enter a river. If you have a huge galleon, those will not go into rivers. You'll get stuck. And whenever you get off the boat, that is when an explorer is most likely to be threatened. Several famous European explorers are killed by native populations when they got off the boat. 2 examples would be Ferdinand Magellan and James Cook, the discoverer of Hawaii, Australia, etc. for the British. They got off the ship, not good for them. You stay on the ship, you're more likely to stay alive. So we want to stay on the ship, at least in the early days of exploration. Because as you know, there's a process here. We're going to explore, we're going to conquer, we're going to set up the colonies. So explore, conquer, colonization. That's the process we're going to take through here. And in AP World, we spent like 3 days on this. We're going to spend like the next 15 minutes. Because again, this should be like the 5th time you've heard this stuff or read it at some point in your life. Okay? There's Prince Henry the Navigator, Portuguese, financially supports Portugal's effort into this. The main motivation for the Portuguese and the Spanish at the beginning is to get to China, Asia by water. We know that if we sail south of Africa, at some point it's got to stop, and we should be able to sail around Africa and get to Asia. The problem is we don't know how far south it goes. We don't know how long that might take. So the Portuguese start doing this in 1419. And over the next 75 years, they slowly move their way down Africa 20, 30, 40 miles every year, establishing forts, making friends. This will be important when we get to the New World, because it is the Portuguese that initiate the desire to trade slaves with their African friends, and that begins the transatlantic slave trade. It's the Portuguese that actually initiate that process. The British will have the largest volume eventually, but it is the Portuguese that initiate the process. Okay? Charlie, I've just got to ask, are you on like a Nintendo Switch, or what is going on there? Is that your device for class? Because it looks, are you looking at the PowerPoint on your phone?
Yeah, I'm looking at the PowerPoint on my phone.
Fine. Okay, I'm just making sure. I was making sure you weren't gaming. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, it was kind of, that's fine. All right, anyway. So, Henry the Navigator puts a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. He's a massive slave trader. Absolutely. Definitely a huge part of it. And so we explore the west coast of Africa. Bartholomew Dias becomes the first European to hit the southern tip of Africa, called the Cape of Good Hope, 1487 to 1488. He sails back home, tells everybody, and then they spend the next decade plotting their provisions and their needs to go all the way to Asia, doing some math, trying to figure out, once they know that southern tip of Africa, how long they think it might take them to get to India, China, etc. All right. Vasco da Gama, 1497-98, becomes the first European to sail to Asia by water. Well, you have to sail to Asia by water. You can't sail any other way. But anyway, he is in your study guide as the required example. So Vasco da Gama, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay, first European to sail to Asia. Now, here's an important thing to know. We know when we get to the New World, there's going to be, ooh, white people, they might be gods, or they have cool tech we've never seen, or we're just scared of them. And does that happen when the Europeans show up to India? No. We've been trading with white people for a millennia, and they kind of suck. So please understand, we know the Europeans will eventually dominate much of the world. We are nowhere near that time yet. The way I always describe it, this is like watching a YouTube video of like Beyonce's 5th grade talent show. I'm sure she slayed for a 10-year-old. But if a like seasoned performer who was 21 and had been, in a movie and training for 10 more years, and they would have wiped the floor with her, because she's a 10-year-old girl. She has great promise. I'm sure she could sing very well, but she just wasn't trained and had the experience. Like watching LeBron James play basketball when he was 15. I'm sure he looked like he was 25 and probably crushing the other kids, but if he played real pros when he was 15, it wouldn't have gone well. So this is Europe in their early phases of transitioning from meh to major power. So please do not overwhelm me with the Europeans started to dominate. No. No. We're not there yet. We're not close to being there yet, especially in Asia. In the Americas, sure, they come in and kind of start taking over fairly early. Asia, it's going to take another 300 years, because the Asians have, India and China, to give you a statistic to support this, in 1600, 3/5 of all world trade went through either India or China. 3/5 of all global trade, 60%, went through either India or China. The Europeans are nothing at that point in Asia. Nothing. Okay? Christopher Columbus, we all know this. We're not going to go through it. Come on. He makes 4 journeys. The last one he goes home in chains because he was stealing from the Spanish. Ferdinand and Isabella, that give him the money to do these voyages and the support, are underwritten by the Medici Bank, which is fascinating. A couple years ago, we went to go to Seville in Spain, which is where the major port was for the Spanish government. And we were in the room where Ferdinand and Isabella heard his pitch and agreed. Ferdinand evidently was not pleased, but Isabella, who kind of was in charge, said, "Si, senor." And so, yes, you will get your money. And so that is when Columbus, an Italian from the city of Genoa, which is on the Mediterranean Sea, is going to sail for the Spanish because they had the money and the organization to support him. And of course, hopefully you understand the reason that is the case. If all the ships ended up in the bottom of the ocean, we'll just raise your taxes. So we can afford to take risks. You see that often. You see that often. I know, for example, Caden, in research, you're talking about space travel and public and private space travel and all that. Early space travel is all government funded. Okay. And so we often see that where the government goes first, things get easier, gets more affordable, and then others will jump in because governments can always just raise taxes in a way that, and borrow money in a way that private citizens can't. All right. Other voyages of exploration, you don't need to memorize a lot of these, but again, there's your map. You see like the yellow of Da Gama and all those guys. You see eventually Sir Francis Drake there in green, going to cross the Pacific Ocean, circumnavigate the world along with Magellan. So those are really the big ones to know as we get into Asia. Columbus, Magellan is our first circumnavigator, even though he himself dies halfway through in the Philippines, but his crew finishes up and returns to Lisbon in 1521. And at that point, we've circumnavigated the globe. Okay, there's more maps, all that good stuff, all these different exploration missions. Basically, what we're looking for is resources, gold, God, glory. We also believe in what is called the Northwest Passage, that we can find a water route to completely cross over the Americas. That is not true. Becomes true in the early 20th century when we build the Panama Canal, but it was not true before that time. Okay, so that's exploration. Now we have stage 2, conquest. The biggest empire in the New World in the early 1500s is the Aztecs. The Aztecs control today most of which is Mexico. And Cortez arrives in 1519 on the shores of what today is eastern Mexico with 600 men. He is so committed to doing this. There's a lot of grumbling when they first arrive. His guys are not really sure this is going to work. They have a lot of doubts. He has his own ships burned in the middle of the night while they're sleeping so that they literally cannot sail back to Europe. We are in it to win it, and that's it. So Cortez had a lot of, shall we say, fortitude or stupidity, depending on your preferences. He also, of course, is dealing with a native population that has been enslaved by the Aztecs, conquered by them. So he promises a lot of the different native groups that he will free them. He will give them opportunities. He will be their liberator. Of course, all that's a lie, but whatever. What is the number one reason why the Spanish are able to so easily conquer a major empire of millions of people with 600 dudes?
Because all the other tribes around them hate the Aztecs.
No, that's not the major reason. I heard somebody say it.
Smallpox.
Smallpox disease. We have no immunity, no exposure to this in the Americas. Remember, the Americas have been isolated from Afro-Eurasia for about 10,000 years at this point. And when smallpox starts to come over, we see massive death tolls. By 1600, 90% of Native Americans are dead. 90%. And that is mostly due to disease. Okay? He also has some guns and stuff, but they're not terribly effective. They don't really help a whole lot. Montezuma lets Cortez all the way into the capital city. They try to be nice to him. They try to give him gifts thinking they'll go away. Of course, all that does is make them want more. It was a bad strategy. Looking back, it did not go well. Okay? So here are some various depictions of the death of the leader. You see there one of the arquebuses, as they're called in the top left, the guns of the time period. They are not terribly accurate, but there is Cortez seated on the Aztec throne. Okay? We also have Pizarro versus the Inca in South America. Similar tale. Disease, technology, and mostly just an indomitable will to spread their conquest, and take the money and also their religion. That's part of it. All right, we know we will set up colonies. The number one cash crop of the New World is sugar. Sugar is cheap. Sugar is addictive. So we also start to bring in tea from Asia. So we see the introduction of tea into Europe, especially in Britain, and the desire for sweet tea, which is just sugar in it, is something that makes a massive demand. So the number one cash crop is sugar. I'm sure all of you remember this. What you learned about slavery and colonization in APUS last year was true, I have no doubt, but it is true for the United States. The United States is an outlier. Only about 5 to 6% of all the slaves brought from Africa are brought to the United States. The vast majority are Caribbean and South American. They're almost all men, and their purpose is to process sugar. It's a very labor-intensive process, as you see from this schematic, this drawing here. You cannot just take sugar and leave it sitting in the field, it will caramelize. And while caramel is delicious, it is not going to be something you put in your tea to satisfy a customer. So we got to process it. It's very heavy. You got to cut through bark. It's a difficult process. So sugar is the vast majority of what we're doing. Eventually we'll diversify coffee and other stuff, but at the beginning it's almost all sugar. And of course the other thing is silver. Going for silver as well, okay? We found a mountain of silver in what is today Bolivia called Potosi. They're still pulling silver out of it today. And the Europeans, as I'm sure you may remember from World, are going to make arrangements with the Chinese that the Chinese will accept the silver from the New World for European goods. And so the vast majority of the world's silver is going to end up on a ship going towards China. Okay? We call what has happened the Columbian Exchange. This is all the exchanges that take place between Afro-Eurasia and the Americas after 1492. You do not need to memorize these lists, but let us briefly highlight some big ones. Okay? So, obviously the arrow at the top is stuff that goes from the Americas to Afro-Eurasia for the first time. On the bottom is stuff that goes from Afro-Eurasia to the Americas for the first time. You see in the bottom, the diseases are pretty prevalent there. Also various fruits and whatnot. Coffee, which will eventually become a major cash crop. Coffee is originally from Yemen in the Arabian Peninsula, if you are wondering. Horses, beast of burdens, cattle. We had no major beast of burdens in the Americas for thousands of years, so horses are brought over. Well, Mr. Rich, the bison of North America for Native Americans, yeah, those aren't beast of burden. We're not putting a saddle on a bison and using it to build stuff for us. Okay, they were not tame animals. And then at the top, we do have syphilis come across the Atlantic Ocean towards Afro-Eurasia. It is thought that perhaps the Renaissance painter Raphael is one of the first Europeans to die from syphilis because he was rather fond of the ladies, especially those that work for a living, and they were rather fond of him. He was a frequent customer. And then we have the big two, potato and corn. Potato and corn, which will revolutionize the nutrition of Afro-Eurasians. Potato has about 4 times the nutritional value of wheat, corn twice the nutritional value of wheat, which was the predominant crop in much of Europe. So the potato is easy. You bury the seed, you pull it out of the ground a couple months later. It is not labor intensive. You don't have to do anything to it. So it becomes, and it's cheap, and it's got a storehouse of nutrients. So it becomes the major food stuff in many European countries, as I'm sure many of you know, famously Ireland, where that doesn't go well in the 19th century. All right. So you don't need to know a lot of details. If you know 1 or 2 things across the ocean each way, that would be sufficient. And that's, if you had me in AP World, we did all this stuff a couple years ago. Everybody cool with that? Any questions? All right, let's finish this up. Already did that. So there's gold. We hit a highlight, and then we start doing less because there's only so much gold in the world, so we can't keep getting it. So we do pretty well in the 1500s, and it starts to decrease in volume because we kind of find what's there. You see the colonies that we form. Spain there is in the orange. The Portuguese are that yellow, and then you see a couple others, New England, northern South America. The Dutch have a colony. You may know that French Guiana is still a colony today in northern South America. Any idea why the internal part of South America is not colonized at this time?
Because the mountains.
Amazon rainforest. Yep, Amazon rainforest. It's kind of, we still know there are tribes today that have not been discovered and have not been dealt with in modern terms. So we just kind of stay alone, leave them alone and stay away from them. All right, so without too much detail, here's how we set up our colonies. We have what's called encomienda. It's a system of trying to get people to come over. We don't want anybody to come over and set up colonies. We want people of ability and training. So if you remember, we target the younger sons of wealthy families because according to European culture, the oldest son inherited pretty much everything when dad died. Mom got nothing, kids got nothing. Older brother could then give his family stuff, and sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. So even if you had money, if you were a younger son of a rich family, you'd never be the count, never be the duke, never be that. So a lot of those guys were targeted because they were educated, they were well-trained. Come to the New World. We will give you land. We will give you slaves. You develop it, you keep the money. And so that's what encomienda was. And so this system is very successful. It costs the Spanish government nothing, because they don't pay anything and they stole the land. They took it in conquest. So whenever these people start turning a profit on their farms, or haciendas, which is the Spanish word for plantation, then we just tax them. And it works incredibly well. After about 75 years, we shut it down. We don't have any more land to give. We don't have any more slaves to give. So it works incredibly well. This is also used to establish mines. So it's how they establish their mines and plantations in South America. It works incredibly well. Okay? Catholic Church is very important, as you can imagine. That's a huge part of our colonial mission, is to convert the natives. It's pretty easy when we are dying of smallpox and only the brown folks are dying of smallpox. It's pretty easy to say, your gods are not protecting you. Our gods clearly are. So many of them convert willingly. And so to this day, over 80% of Latin Americans are Catholic. Over 80%. Okay? Important factoid explaining good things, or not good things, but the things. The Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494, that is that green line there. It goes through eastern South America. Everything east of that line was, according to the Pope, Portuguese to own and distribute in the New World. That is why to this day, Brazil is the only Portuguese colony, and today they speak Portuguese and have that cultural heritage. Everything to the west was under Spanish control. Clearly in 1494, we do not know how big the Americas are, because Portugal got hosed in this deal. I mean, of course, who really got screwed over would be the native peoples. That's an obvious given. But west of that line is Spanish, east is Portuguese. So today, why are most Latin Americans Catholic? Treaty of Tordesillas. Why do most people in South and Central America speak Spanish? Treaty of Tordesillas. Why do the Brazilians have a Portuguese cultural heritage and speak Portuguese? Treaty of Tordesillas. Pretty straightforward. Okay? And yeah, I think we're done there. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that's exploration. So again, exploration, conquest, colonization. The sole purpose of colonization, make money. That is the purpose. Everybody good? Super easy. I actually followed my own timeline. I said it'd take 20 minutes. It did. Wow. I think I'm just in a hurry these days because I'm trying to keep us going, because I know we don't have a lot of time to waste. Because as many of you know, I am fond of the occasional detour in the educational process. But, okay, more than the occasional. All right, last thing for today. We're going to bridge the Renaissance and the Reformation and talk briefly about a philosophy called Christian humanism. So we know what humanism is. Can someone tell me what humanism is?
The idea that humans are actually good and like we have potential to develop our minds. And
Great, Caleb. Good job. You had Christian to it. Why?
Because it's the idea that we're made in the image of God.
Yeah. And according to the biblical narrative in Genesis of creation, we are the culmination, the greatest. We are created on the 6th day, and on the 7th day he rested. So he doesn't create us first, he creates us last, which of course in our interpretation means we're the best. However, medieval Christianity says we suck. Everything we do is sinful, wasteful, terrible, awful, blah, 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 blah. So this is today we'd call it a rebranding. Like we're going to rebrand humanity. We're going to reevaluate our place in the universe. We are not terrible. Yes, we do terrible things. Yes, we mess up. Yes, sometimes we're lazy. Sometimes we commit adultery, or we murder people, or we're just spiteful and we're haters. But we are the greatest of God's creation. So we have capacity that other creatures, other animals do not. So let us celebrate that in humanity. Okay? Now we know that in the Renaissance, we're going to start to have, the late medieval period, there are some questions about the church. We had 3 popes for a while. Okay? We have had, several issues where we have people that are not qualified to be priests being priests. None of those things are good. So we want to try to reestablish some sense of what our morality is. And some writers start to question the church. In general, how do you think the different popes' responses are to people questioning their authority? I'm getting a lot of head nods. That is correct. Or head shakes, I guess. So that is a no. The church is not terribly receptive. So what I need you to understand before next week is Martin Luther does not come out of nowhere. In the AP World version of the Reformation, Martin Luther's mad because the church is doing bad things, and because that's the simple version. It's a lot more complex, as most things in life are. This is a long-standing, multi-century journey towards eventually a German guy writing 95 complaints and nailing them to a church door. Okay? And so the Christian humanists are an important part of that. So I want to show you one more time, one more screen share. We're going to look at 2 quick documents about 2 of the most famous Christian humanists, both of whom are in your study guide. Ooh, okay. So, I lied, there's 3 documents, but that's okay. I forgot. So document 1 is kind of ridiculous, but it also explains the concept. Now, Johann Reuchlin is not the guy we're concerned about. But very briefly and dramatically, yours truly will go through this document with you. So we're sitting in an inn, for you must know that we were lately sitting in an inn, which hotel, basically a restaurant, an early version of that, having our supper, and we're eating eggs when on opening one, I saw there was a young chicken sitting within. Ugh. This I showed to a comrade, a friend, whereupon he quoth to me, eat it up speedily before the taverner sees it, for if he mark it, you have to pay for a fowl. In other words, he's going to charge you for meat. In a trice, quickly, I gulped down the egg, chicken, and all. And then I remembered that it was Friday. Why would it be concerned that it's Friday?
Because Lent, maybe?
Could be. So what do you mean? So why is that a problem?
Like, Christians fast sometimes, and like sometimes certain days, like you're not supposed to eat meat.
Correct. You're not supposed to eat on Friday specifically. All right. Whereupon I said to my crony, you have made me commit a mortal sin in eating flesh on the 6th day of the week. Now, mortal sin, there are 2 kinds of sins, FYI. We have what's called a venial sin, V-E-N-I-A-L. Venial is like minor. Like, in my head, I'm looking at Caleb with his hood on, and I think he looks goofy. That's not nice, okay? Especially when it's like wrapped up tight like you're a baby in swaddling clothes. That's okay. But I'm saying it, so it makes it better. But a venial sin is like a minor thing. Like you farted and then was like, I don't know who did that, something like that. Or you were rude to someone, or you wore your sister's shirt without asking, that kind of thing. A mortal sin, when we see M-O-R-T, what does that mean?
It's grounds.
You murdered someone or something very intense.
Death, mortician, mortuary, yes, morbid. So, mort is a deadly sin. Have we heard of this before? Does anyone know how many deadly sins there were or are?
7 deadly sins.
Yes. One of my favorite 90s movies called Seven, where there's a serial killer who kills people in because they committed one of the 7 deadly sins, at least in his mind. And he kills them in rather specific ways related to their particular sin. So, in other words, these are sins that will make you go to hell. So he is concerned because he's accidentally eaten a piece of meat on a Friday, he might be going to hell. But he averred that it was not a mortal sin, nor even a venial sin, seeing that such a chickling is encountered merely as an egg until it is born. Then I departed and thought the matter over. So he's like, oh, okay. You ever freak out for a minute, and then you kind of go, okay, I'm good. It's fine. And by the Lord, I am in a mighty quandary and know not what to do. So he thought he was fine. Then he's probably trying to go to sleep, and it starts hitting his head. Oh, what am I going to do? It seemeth to me that these young fowls and egg are flesh, because their substance is formed and fashioned into the limbs and body of an animal, and possesseth a vital principle. It is different in the case of grubs and cheese, ew, worms, and such like, because grubs are accounted fish, as I learned from a physician who is also skilled in natural philosophy. That's a bunch of garbage, but that's what they thought. Most earnestly do I entreat you to resolve the question that I have propounded. For if you hold that the sin is mortal, then I would fain get shrift here ere I return to Germany. In other words, he's probably a merchant. He's German, in case you couldn't tell by Johann Reuchlin. He is going back to the German states. He is not in Germany now. He's got a long journey. He might die. Does he need to go to church and get forgiveness and confession from a priest before he starts the journey? Because he doesn't want to die with this mortal sin in his conscience, and he goes to hell. Because if you have light sins on your conscience, you go to purgatory, the middle ground, where you pay off that sin. If you commit a mortal sin, you're going to hell. Now, that seems like a very minute, detailed point that seems not terribly important. And that is the point of the Christian humanist. We start to question all this focus on rules, on detail, on the minutia of what about the big picture? What about living our lives to be kind and supportive of others? And so the Christian humanists, namely Thomas More and Desiderius Erasmus, which we'll meet in the next page, they start questioning this. So Thomas More, very quickly. Now, Thomas More is probably most famous for the following. Today's St. Thomas More. You may know that Kentucky has a Thomas More College. He is the finance guy for Henry VIII. They were homies. They grew up together. They knew each other well. When Henry VIII famously wants to end his first marriage and marry a new woman for pretty crappy reasons, the Catholic Church won't let him, and so he creates his own new church, as I'm sure you know the broad strokes of that, which we'll get into next week. He tells all his officials, I need y'all to support me on this. I need you publicly, like, Henry's doing the right thing. Whoop! Thomas More is a devout Catholic. He refuses. Henry says, if you do not publicly support me, I know we've been friends since we were children, I will have you executed. Thomas More is like, do what you got to, bro. So Thomas More has his head chopped off for failing to publicly support Henry VIII, which makes him a martyr, someone who died for their beliefs, and today is Saint Thomas More of the Catholic Church. So this is going to seem critical of the church, but know that Thomas More died as a Catholic rather than support Henry's divorce. So this is not a man who is wishy-washy about his faith. The true church of Christ is the common known church of all Christian people, not gone out nor cast out. The whole body, both of good and bad, is the Catholic Church of Christ. This church was gathered and the faith believed before any part of the New Testament was put in writing. Y'all focusing on the book. Y'all focusing on a random verse in the Bible. The belief in Christianity was held by those who walked with Christ before anything was ever written down. Jesus didn't write down anything. So y'all getting lost in the details of a book instead of worshiping God as you should in your heart. And which was or is the true scripture? Neither Luther nor Tyndale, he's the first person to put the Bible in English, Tyndale, knoweth but by the credence that they give to the church. The church was before the gospel was written, and the faith was taught, and men were baptized, and masses said, and the other sacraments administered among the Christian people, before any part of the New Testament was put in writing. In other words, take-home message, the church is not about all the random rules. Thomas More would look at document 1, which is why it's there, and say, you're an idiot. Why are you focusing on all this stuff? You are missing the point. We all do this. If you want to go have a meal with friends, the point is to enjoy each other's company, to socialize, to talk, to spend time together. In the long run, who really cares which restaurant it is or where we go or what? But sometimes we get so focused on, well, I had that last week, I don't want it again. I'm on keto. Can they provide keto for me at the restaurant? If they can't, we just get like a burger and take off the bun. Okay, like that, you can make this stuff work. But sometimes we get so fixated on the rules and the structure, we lose the point. Have you ever done that for something in your life? That's the argument of the Christian humanist. And I know we're at 9:30, but give me like 3 more minutes and we'll finish. So the last one is Erasmus, who is Dutch, probably the most famous and widely read Christian humanist. Again, a hardcore Catholic, but wrote a book famously called In Praise of Folly, which is sarcasm. He's calling all these rules and details and church folly. It's stupid. We should be focused on loving each other, on being kind to each other, on serving the poor and helping those less fortunate. And instead we're worried about whether you and I agree a vow should be in this one letter of one verse in the Bible. I utterly dissent, I disagree, that those willing that the sacred scripture should be read by the unlearned translated into their vulgar tongue, as though Christ taught such subtleties that they can scarcely be understood even by a few theologians, or as though the strength of the Christian religion consisted in men's ignorance of it. What is my dude mad about? Put that in common English for me.
Like 90% of people can't even read the Bible or know what it really is other than what they're told.
True, but why? What is the church's official language?
Latin.
Latin. So even if I could read, even if I can't read, I can't go to church and even understand the words I'm hearing the priest say. In nomine Patri, et Filii, Spiritus Sancti. That's in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That I can get, but a lot of this stuff, wee. And he's like, vulgar tongue means your average daily tongue. This is the debate. Please write this down. We're almost done. About the vernacular. 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 Vernacular is common language. Should we translate the Bible into common language? Which is what Martin Luther eventually does. He puts the New Testament out in German for the first time. But that's a big debate in the Reformation. And this is pre-Reformation. We're already debating that before. Again, Martin Luther doesn't start this stuff. He's the most famous practitioner of it, but he does not like pop fully grown out of the forehead of the Catholic Church. He comes from a long tradition of questioning, of saying, why can't we do this, blah, 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 blah. The mysteries of kings it may be safer to conceal, but Christ wished his mysteries to be published as openly as possible. Translate this sucker into Dutch, into English, into French, into Spanish. I wish, sorry ladies, that even the weakest woman should read the gospel. Should read the epistles or letters of Paul. Most of the New Testament are letters from the prophet Paul to the early churches of the Christian faith. And I wish that they were translated into all languages so they might be read and understood, not only by Scots and Irishmen, but also by Turks and Saracens, aka Muslims. To make them understood is surely the first step. It may be that they might be ridiculed by many, but some would take them to heart. I long that the husbandman should sing portions of them to himself as he follows the plow, that the weaver should hum them to the tune of his shuttle, that the traveler should beguile with the stories with the tedium of his journey. Put the Bible in the vernacular, let people read it. What are you afraid of? Why are you being so secretive? Why are you hiding? Is it about the power of the church, or is it about the access to the material for the people? And this is a hardcore Catholic. He never converted. He died a Catholic. So this is people on Team Catholic already questioning the practices of the church. And this is before we get to Martin Luther and John Calvin and Henry VIII. Okay? Does that make sense? So if I asked you to summarize the position of Christian humanists, the two things we looked at were translate the Bible and have services in common languages. And stop worrying about all the rules and the details. Focus on the big picture, the love, the community, helping one another, et cetera, et cetera. Don't be worried about whether I accidentally took a bite of an egg on a Friday that might have had a little bit of the chicken already growing in it, and then I'm going to go to hell if I die on the way home because I had a little tiny bit of meat accidentally on a Friday. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, lovely. So you guys have a great day. Again, if I do not have your reading quiz, make sure that's uploaded today, please. And on Thursday, we are going to talk current events and what that means and what that looks like. And then I know it's weird, but I will teach you about the European Union because that will factor quite a bit into your current events research. And so I will go a little bit out of time and then we'll go back to the Reformation next week. All right, got it? Y'all have a great day. Thank you very much. Deuces.
Take care.